Those sweet memories stay with me day and night. Touch was written and directed by Baltasar Chromacore, who did Two Guns, Everest, and Beast. Remember Beast? I remember Beast. I saw trailers for it for a while. It promised Idris Elba punching out a lion. He did eventually, but it sure took a while. But nevertheless, check out his IMDb page to see what else he's been up to. This is based on a novel by Olaf Olafsson. And boy, his parents must have just not given a shit that day. Let's take the first half of the last name and make it his first name and cut it, print it. It's beautiful. He will go on to do big things. He did, because he published a novel that got turned into this movie. It's currently streaming on Peacock. It got a limited theatrical release. I meant to check it out in theaters because it had quite a bit of positive critical and audience reception, but I just didn't get around to it. What do you want from me? I can't exactly divulge all my time towards movies and theaters when I have other shit to do, like working and eventually sleeping. So, since it's on Peacock, I decided to give it a shot. And the story of this particular movie has to do with Christopher Egil Olafsson. If I mispronounce any of the actors' names in this, I do apologize. Who is an elderly Icelandic man that doesn't have all that long to live, according to certain pieces of information that we get. And he decides, before his time on Earth is through, he wants to reunite with basically his first extreme love, Miko. And we find out how they met. We see also the beginning of the pandemic, that fucking fiasco. God, maybe we never revisit that time again. Very, very tough time for those that worked and those that it just, oh boy. Nevertheless, it had a little bit of sense of time and constraint to this particular, time period and this particular story, because he's running out of time. There's a health scare, all that stuff. But we do go back and forth, back and forth. Jazz personality, deep mentality, and let's just not go on with that song. Back and forth. I'm sorry. So sorry. We see the younger versions of Christopher and Miko. He decides to basically leave his studies and go to a Japanese restaurant in London, because he's studying abroad, to basically start working there. And there he falls in love with Miko, and vice versa. We find out how this happens, and then we see an older Christopher trying to reconnect with Miko and hitting certain stumbling blocks. And there are a lot of people that will compare this movie to Past Lives, essentially. And I will argue that Past Lives is a better movie. One, Past Lives is shorter. This is a beefy, 2 hours and 1 minute. And I think that they could have maybe trimmed a couple things down, to be perfectly honest. That's not knocking the movie. I really, really did love it. Thought the performances are great. And thought there was a lot of really good shit and a lot of stuff that you could just touch upon. Ironic for a movie named Touch. And a lot of it is in the expressions of the actors and just a well-told story, taking its time. And it did kind of admittedly rush a few things, despite the fact I said they could have cut a couple things. It also kind of rushed a few things where it's like, we're just going to do an exposition dump at the end. So are there a couple issues? Sure. I mean, maybe a couple minor pacing issues, but Touch really is a beautifully told story with some great performances, younger and older alike. And it does really tell, how sometimes you may want to go back and maybe you can't get back that time. You never really can, much like the movie that I just recently watched, My Old Ass, as something that's going to be out in a couple weeks as of this recording. Please check that out at your local theater, cinema, whatever the fuck you call it. But Touch does show how, love has basically no time constraints. You can always find some way to reconnect, one way or another. And I did like a vast majority of this movie, and even with the few minor issues that I had, I thought this was one of the best films of the goddamn year. And I'm going to get into spoilers here in a bit, but it is on Peacock if you want to check it out. The performances are really what carry this movie. And sure, there are some basic, well-worn, familiar tropes that the movie does fall back on. But when you're doing a story like this, and you tell it this beautifully, and you have genuine performances and reasoning behind it, even if you don't agree with some of those reasons, it ends up being a story that you absolutely can appreciate. Has a bit of a gut punch of an ending. But that being said, I am going to get into spoilers. So it's on Peacock if you want to check it out. Good performances, well filmed. 3, 2, 1, and spoilers. So basically, we see him, Christopher basically getting a pseudo diagnosis. He's having memory issues. He's having some problems. We did start out with some Icelandic singing. That's why I did the quote in the beginning, because I'm not going to try to sing in general because I suck. But also, not that it's ever stopped me before, but trying to sing in Icelandic, I don't even think I can. I can't sing like an Icelandic person. Neither can Bjork, but I digress. So, older Christopher is reflecting on his time, and the quarantine, all this stuff. Countries are shutting down because of the pandemic. We see how he studied in London the late 60s, and that's right where the Vietnam War protests are really going on, and a lot of like things are touched upon, but they really just focus on Christopher and Miko. And he gets a job at this takeout restaurant, this Japanese, bar essentially. Takahashi-san, who is the owner, the father, he runs into Miko, and you can instantly tell there's a fucking connection. They take their time building it, but you can instantly tell. Sometimes people are just meant to fucking be together, even if it's just for a brief amount of time, and that's the proof here. So he gets the interview. He talks about fish and other stuff and how he used to work on fishing boats. He ingratiates himself with Takahashi-san and his wife, Hidamori, which, again, butchering these names probably, I apologize. But then time of the season, what's your name, who's your daddy, is he rich like me? That song plays, because of course that song is going to play if something's set in the late 60s. So while we're seeing these flashbacks, we see the current time where Christopher asks a hotel clerk in London, hey, can you possibly find this person? Oh, okay, let's look for this. The guy does find where she used to live, and also the old place. It's a tattoo shop. He decides to get a freaking tattoo, because why the fuck not? And more so back and forth. The friends are kind of dicks. He heads off to Tokyo. I'm kind of skipping over some of this stuff because really is a story that you need to say played out. He has a daughter or his wife. Now he's a widower because his wife unfortunately passed away. He still has a connection with her daughter that is his daughter by proxy. And she's worried about his health and also the fact that he's, that he's essentially traveling while not doing all that well during, a global pandemic that's about to hit. And there's a dinner with Migo, and she said, I told Dad not to hire you, so he would. Do reverse psychology because it's still very, men superior to women. Women have to be subservient to the men in Japanese culture. At least I assume that's what they were going for. The back and forth is very well paced. They eventually do hook up. There is a Rushine, I believe, plays Mrs. Ellis. She's like the landlady of this particular place that Christopher is staying at. She's kind of a bit of a racist dick. Warns him to be careful around Japanese people because, we're still in the aftermath of the war, even though it's been 20-something years, and we have to be racist for no reason. So we got some more exposition. It turned out that the family fled Hiroshima. Her mother died because of burns and complications and everything a year after she was born. That was pretty much a gut punch scene right there. She mentions the word Hiba Kusha, which is atomic bomb survivor. And she had a boyfriend at the time, and the boyfriend found out about this. The dad told him, and that was it. I guess that was enough because the idea was she couldn't have children. And all this time he's traveling to Japan. He eventually does meet somebody at the apartment complex or where she's living that knows her. Guy needed to learn how to wear a mask because he's wearing it like this. That's not how you wear a mask, you fucking idiots. But in general, that's not how you wear them, regardless of whether there was any kind of global pandemic or not. So we do have one final flashback scene, so to speak, where they hook up in the restaurant and basically just fuck on the goddamn counter. But then she has to leave. They end up moving back to Japan because the dad is kind of sick of his daughter acting out, so to speak, in quotations. And then he ends up at the apartment, talks to her. She sees him through the door and everything. She'd been sick, but she's getting better. And they do end up hugging. She says, "Forgive me." That was beautiful and touching and everything. Like, forgive me for leaving. They did love you, and they did love each other. And the dad thought that she would never be able to conceive children. If she did, they would be, deficient. They would be mutated. So the idea was to sterilize her when she got back home. Remember that time on the counter? Well, it turns out she was actually pregnant. And she had to sign over her paternal rights because the dad felt that she would not be able to take care of the kid. That's dickish to do, but the kid was being taken care of by an Australian man and a Japanese woman and owns a restaurant. And she goes there often, but he doesn't know that she's his biological mother. She's just there as a guest. And then Christopher goes there, and they talk to him. You can see that he has their genetics, at least that's what they were going for. And then that Icelandic singing that was in the beginning was also sung at a birthday party where he sung that song, and that's where she fell in love with him. That's shared upon at the end of the movie. He does some humming of that Icelandic theme, and that ends the movie right there, and that's it. That is it for Touch. It is a beautiful story. Again, a couple minor issues, but it is what it is. Past Lives, again, to me, still superior, but Touch is really, really good. I hate to compare stuff, but it's kind of hard not to with the age stuff and the long time between, love uniting and all that. That being said, A+, still really, really fucking good. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Reckland. I'll see you soon.